All right. Hope everyone's doing well. I'll wait another minute, let a few people get on here. And it looks like a lot of people are jumping on pretty quick, which is great. So who are you? My name's Howard Sherman. I just posted this in the comments. I'm from Houston, Texas. Sometimes I'm in a studio in Houston. Sometimes I'm in a studio in New York City. And what we're going to do today, I guess now's as good a time as any to start. What I'm going to do with y'all today is basically give you a little bit of a show and tell around my studio. I might occasionally look down at my notes a little bit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I've got going on here. I'll show you some of my process and just sort of meander around. You'll see me. I'll show some stuff that I'm putting together. Then I'll show a lot of finished things. I'll talk about those and maybe ramble on a little bit. Hopefully not too much. Y'all are going to have to bear with me. I just had a bunch of coffee before I jumped on here. So if I get a little yammery, you'll know why. Also, I'll be happy to take some questions towards the end. We'll probably go for about a half an hour, for about 30 minutes. And before I get into all of that, I wanted to say thank you to Saatchi Gallery and Georgina and Brennan for helping me with put this together today. It's a little bit of a production because it's such a big, because they've got sort of such a large, robust profile. And so this has been kind of a little bit of a learning curve for me, but it's been really great and interesting. So I'd like to thank them and thank Saatchi Gallery for letting me do this takeover. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll talk. You'll see me in my blinding glare coming off my dome, and then I'll rotate the camera around at times and point it to stuff I've got, I want y'all to see, okay? So basically, what I do is I make excuse me, I make drawings and paintings. And I guess the best thing I could do is I'll show you a finished one, and then I'll show you something simple first. How's that? I'll show you a finished one here, or a couple of finished ones. Here, forgive the glare. Here's a small work on paper that I do. And here's another one. And I'll show you more a little bit later. I'm going to zoom in, show you how I put them together. And then what we'll do, I'll walk over. And so what I do is I'm going to walk around here for a second. What I do is let me flip it around. I have a couple of boxes of material here. As you can see, I collage a lot into my drawings and paintings. And right now what I'm doing here in the studio is I keep a box of paper, which is over here. And then I keep a box of canvas scraps over here. And all of this stuff, I'm going to move back. Let me back up. Man, y'all, the studio is a bit of a mess, but you get the idea. I kind of keep paper with paper and canvas with canvas, and I'll take unresolved old drawings and paintings, and I'll cut them up and discard them. And I will, if I find an interesting part to them, this is almost a finished piece here. If I find an interesting part to them, what I will do is I'll use that, right? And then I make small things and big things. This is something very small. This was actually kind of resolved, but then I was trying to figure out a way to use it a little bit differently. But these are all just scraps of unresolved old works. And then, so as an example, I'm going to grab one. And then what we'll do here is, okay, so then I'll go over here to this wall here. And a lot of times what I'll do, I'm going to try and do this and talk and do this at the same time. So a lot of times what I will do is draw Hold on just a second. So I'll do something like I'll draw either a big shape, a big simple shape, or maybe I will, as an example, I'll just sort of make some sort of crazy gestural mark or something like that, you know. And then what I generally, I don't really have, the goal is to make, let's flip back around. The goal would be to, the plan is to have as little bit of a plan as possible, although that's impossible, right? But the idea here would be, I'm going to flip back around one more time. The idea would be to then take this and react against it, maybe by collaging something into it. And so it ends up being, forgive me for the shaky camera work, but it'll end up, this isn't going to look like much, but it'll end up being a bit of call and response. And I'll either glue that down, that bit of scrap from the box, I'll glue that down, or I'll come in and with a paintbrush and paint on that. And I just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until I start to get something that I feel good about, quite frankly, if that makes sense. I hope that makes some sense so far. But anyway, what I'm going to do, because it's a little bit hard to kind of work while I'm holding the phone and talking to y'all, what I'm going to do is go from that. I'll show you something finished, but it started very much like, I'm going to show you a large work on paper that I finished, but it started very much like what I just showed you. We're going to walk over here, and I'm going to point that out, okay? It's amazing how quickly the time goes on here once you get rolling, huh? Okay. And so this would be a finished piece that very much might have started like what I just showed you. I hope that makes sense. I think this is a good one to talk about for a second too, because you can see how I draw and then I paint and then I paint and then I cut up what I've painted and collage it back on until I start finding some sort of a form that I'm interested in. And, as a point of reference, or I should say just as a good point, the other day I did my own Instagram live on here, and it was at Howard_Sherman is my Instagram handle. Anyway, I talked about the difference between subject matter and content. And so in a lot of these works that I'm going to show you, you will see something that feels a little bit, initially you might see something that might feel like an object or a face. You see a lot of portraits or faces in these, but I quickly want you to get past that, and I'm going to zoom in and show you what I'm talking about. And I want you to start thinking about the content of the work, which would be how I use the material and the physicality, which is something that I'm very interested in. If you look really closely, you start to see the surfaces get a little tactile and sculptural. I'm going to show you another large one that you can really get an idea about that. But that would be content, not necessarily subject matter. It's not just about a portrait or a face or something. It's about how I'm manipulating the material. I'm very interested in that. Over the last few years, I've become more and more interested in that. And the surfaces have gotten very sculptural and tactile, and then they've backed down and gotten a little flatter again. And while everything tends to be rectilinear, I kind of play with the irregularity of a vertically oriented rectangle quite a bit. But I hope that made sense. It's an important concept to me, and I did a long video about it that I put on my website the other day after I talked about it on Instagram Live. I hope that made sense. I want to show you another one over here that is along the same lines, a larger piece where I showed you the one I did from the box of paper, but I also showed you a box of canvas scraps over there for collage. And so here would be another one, a larger one. I did this one in the New York studio a while back. And this one's called Guns on the Table, Cash in the Drawer. And it's made, as you can see, there's a lot of just raw canvas scraps used, and a little bit of unresolved paintings that were cut up and used, but mostly raw canvas scraps in this one. So I'm going to step away from that area because it was a little bit, the connection wasn't very good. So I just wanted to show you that. And here I'm going to turn back around and just sort of pan around. The studio is a little bit of a mess, as you can see. Y'all caught me working here. And I kind of keep a lot of scraps going, hammers, scissors, buckets of paint. I'm going to pan over here a little bit. We're going to try and go over here. And since the connection got bad in that corner, I'm going to kind of keep it over here. Here would be a couple other small ones where, again, where you might see something that looks a little bit like a portrait initially. If you look a little closer, I'm very interested in color and the physicality of the material, the content, sorry. Anyway, so I hope, again, I apologize for that slight bump in the connection, but hopefully we'll do a little bit better. We'll do a little bit better over here in this part of the studio. Anyway, what I'd like to do now is show you a couple of larger finished things. So these paintings are both 100 inches tall and 60 inches wide. And once again, the surfaces might feel a little flatter than what I was talking about before. But I'm still sort of taking scraps and collaging back into them. I feel as though the work's become, I think it's all drawing. I think it's all mark making. And I'm going to zoom in on this large painting and sort of show you a little bit more about what I'm talking about. And you can see I took an old painting, which was primarily a black painting, and it looked like it had chalk marks on it, but that was a oil bar. And I collaged sort of these geometric shapes into the lower half of the painting. And so it's a kind of a back and forth between the brushwork and the collage. And they're always about drawing, right? Aren't they? So anyway, I'm going to go over and show you the details of the other one here really quickly. So you can see that. And then I'm going to zoom in and you can see a little more what I'm talking about. In this case, I'm going to go from down to up. You can also see grommets. And a lot of times what might feel like leather or pleather or vinyl is actually just black canvas. I'm interested in like cutting back into it and adding additive and subtractive process in the work and how I make the work. And it's kind of a real dance back and forth between sort of gestural mark making and finding some sort of maybe a figurative reference or a form, kind of cartoony at times. I have a background in cartooning. Anyway, yeah, so we're back to the scrap boxes here, and here's the scraps of canvas. And I don't know, I think that this became such an important part of how I build a drawing over the last few years that I can't see myself working without it, quite frankly, in some form or fashion. Anyway, I think that a lot of times you can see like unresolved drawings right here, or these are old drawings, and I'm going back through and seeing which ones I want to destroy and cut up, which ones I want to use. And there's always a lot of, as you can tell when I go back over here, there's always a lot of fluidity happening in the work, and that's important to me to sort of stay fluid with the brushwork or with the process in general, So I've quickly been talking for 20 minutes. Crazy, huh? What I would like to do is spend I told y'all I'd go for about a half an hour. What I would like to do is spend the last part of this sort of taking questions. I hope that was helpful to you so far. So I'll start. I'm sure I've missed a lot of questions already, but I'll start trying to answer some of these questions. Kind of show some of those drawings. I'm not going to show the ones on the floor. I'm not going to show the. Okay, here's a good question. Is it easier to work in a large size on canvas rather than on paper? The one interesting thing, it's pretty easy for me to work on both, but paper, there's something less precious about paper. And I've kind of been pretty good about getting over this over the years, but, paper is it's just paper, you don't have to spend a fortune on paper. The economic barrier to entry regarding paper is quite low. So, paper isn't very precious, so it's easy to just become unhinged or unencumbered in any way that you want with paper. Canvas can sometimes get a little more pricey. I'm pretty good about not letting that sort of thing bother me, though. So, great question from Disjax. Minka.ctrl, Minka.control. My favorite medium to use. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of mediums that I like, but when you say medium, do you mean like acrylic paint? I guess I like acrylic paint. That would be my medium. I use a little bit of oil paint and I draw back into everything, but I use a lot of acrylic paint. Vlad.Andrusiak, what drives your artistic process? Good question. I don't know. Curiosity. I do know. Probably curiosity. Curiosity drives my artistic process. Franca Ducote, can you demo now? I just did. I did earlier. Sort of showed. I did a little bit of a drawing to show how I start. Jamark, what music do you listen to? I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. Well, I probably end up listening to a lot of jazz and a lot of rock, and a lot of singer-songwriter acoustic stuff, depending on what time of day it is and what mood I'm in. But I keep music going while I'm in the studio. Bryden.Jerus, how do you find working in your house? This has been kind of this is a new situation. It's just temporary. I've got a house for a year, and the convenience of living and working in the space is great. No complaints. Cabin fever is a real thing, though, especially with a pandemic. It makes it even worse. But before the pandemic, it was already kind of tricky. Okay. Another good question from Pegapoo_Arcaratest. I just messed that up. How do you adhere the canvas to canvas? Acrylic medium, matte medium, or gloss medium. I like gloss medium, real super gloss heavy medium, because it's if I want to glue a heavy piece of canvas onto a surface, it holds better than matte medium. But acrylic medium is the short answer to that question. I'm skipping a few things. Zeitgeist Publishing has an interesting question. Okay. The fact that you're reusing parts, does it also have to do with kind of thinking about the earth? Not really, although I do recycle, and I'm considerate of being green. I like the idea. I just simply like the idea of cannibalizing my own work. It's not about saving that much paper or canvas in that regard. And so I wish I had that's just the honest answer. I wish I was it was more of a social political commentary or answer that way, but it's not. It's part of my process to kind of churn back through and cannibalize my own work. People from all over the world on here. Pegapoo, Archer Artist has another question. Do you use found objects? No, I don't. I thought I would, but I don't. I'm way more married to the painter materials like canvas and paper than you would think I would be. Which probably ends up being an asset in the end. Probably ends up being a really good thing in the end. And I'm not that interested in leaving the studio and going out into the world to dumpster dive or anything like that. That's not part of my interest right now. I'll take a couple more questions. We're coming in on 30 minutes, and that might be a good time. Someone knows me on here, which is great. Orchid, someone knows my work. Orchido2, how did you transition from comics to your current work? That's a good question. Essentially what happened was I was doing a daily comic strip for a bunch of newspapers after I finished undergraduate, and I got tired of being on a daily deadline, and I just started making paintings instead, and that was it. And then that led to getting a Master's of Fine Arts, going to graduate school for that, and moving forward in that regard. So the transition, though, I mean, cartoons and comics, there were so many things about that were actually really useful in my painting. Even though I'd stopped doing a daily comic strip for newspapers and got off the daily deadline, a lot of cartoonish figures and that type of drawing and the economy of that line, all of that gets fused into my paintings and drawings, regardless of the scale. And, one of the things that ended up, I'm sure of it, in an indirect way, and ended up being very powerful is, when you're making art in a daily comic strip, the art part has to share space. It literally has to share real estate with a word balloon, with the joke, with the text, right? And then that gets shrunk down to the size of a postage stamp, even if you were reading them on a computer monitor at the time and not in newsprint. So all of that sort of economy of line has somehow snuck into my work, even when my work's gotten incredibly loud, explosive, and busy visually. And also, the discipline of being on a daily deadline was hugely important. That was a self-imposed daily deadline at the time, too. I wasn't on staff anywhere. I was just selling them my work by the bulk, my strips by the bulk. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, and then maybe we'll just call it a day, because the time goes really quickly here. I'm going to flip this back around and go back to these two. And then I'll take a couple. At what point in your career? Hold on. Let me. Esra Gallery has a good question. Other than the cartoon, do you have other references that for certain styles, such as urban art, hip hop culture? Not really that into urban art or hip hop culture, although I get lumped in with graffiti writers sometimes in the press. But it's not something overt. I guess the culture around me indirectly always seeps in. I can't really. I think a lot of modernist art history and art history is in my work, and that's been really important to me. Probably indirectly, there's an assertiveness and aggressiveness and a physicality in the work that's probably leans into heavy metal or hard rock from my younger days. So that's something I haven't talked about a lot, but it's probably important. Outlook 8 Studio, do you work on unstretched canvas? I work on stretched and unstretched canvas, and I showed this piece earlier. I hope I don't lose the signal, but this is a piece over here That is unstretched canvas. If you can see that. Outlook 8 Studio. That piece was unstretched. I can't show it too much. I don't get a great signal over there. But yeah, I have a bunch of unstretched canvas pieces I've done. They're called assemblage pieces. And if you go to howardsherman.com, you can see them. Okay, one more question since we're right at about a half an hour. I'll take one more question. We'll call it a day. Let me find a good one. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just sort of scrolling quickly. I'm trying to find a really killer one to end this with. Julia Shuck, what advice can you give to emerging young artists? Just keep working. Find a community of people. Stay engaged. Don't fall into yourself too much. I think that that's really important. If you're out of school, you need to stay in touch with your crew from school. And if you don't have one, you need to find one. It doesn't matter where you are. And you got to always be looking, always looking, and then look more. Jerry Saltz, I think, has said something like that. But I think it's true. Always get out and look. Get out there and look and talk about work with other people in addition to being in your studio making it. I'm going to pan back around the studio one more time so y'all can get a look. And then I will sign off. Okay, so we'll just sort of do this. I'm stepping over a bunch of buckets and stuff so you can see what's going on here. I hope you like it. That piece over there with the lavender was what I was starting and showing you how I began a drawing earlier at the beginning of the video. There's some drawings on the floor. We're going to skip over that thing there. And, okay. So, here are the small ones. I want to thank y'all for tuning in today. It's been really wonderful. And I hope to stay in touch. You can find me at howardsherman.com or here on Instagram at Howard_Sherman. Thanks again to Saatchi Gallery for letting me do this. I will speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.